Today we are going to talk about these RJ-45 Transceivers. These can really save the day, but you're going to want to be armed with some information before you jump into using them. So stick around. Hey everybody. Before we get into it, just want to say thanks so much. I saw some of y'all say, your get well soons and stuff because I was out sick the other day. But hey, I'm back feeling good and voice just a little bit funky. So hey, sorry about that. Good luck listening. But no, for real. Thanks, y'all. But let's get into it. So sometimes you're going to find that your switch or NIC, instead of having what you might think of as a normal, place to plug in a cable, has just got a hole on there. Well, if that's the case, you're looking at putting a transceiver in there, short for transmitter receiver. And I already did a whole video on those. Maybe I can make the YouTube actually put a link up here somewhere, but I'll put it down in the description as well, just in case you want some more information on fiber connections. So if you see one of those and you're in the enterprise environment, yeah, you're probably just looking at connecting up fiber between that switch or NIC and whatever the other thing is. But if you're in a small office or home office, pretty good chance you're instead looking to run something with an RJ-45 link on it. These days, Cat6A. It's almost hard to come by non-Cat6A anyway. And that'll get you pretty far, as it were. And in that case, that is when you need one of these to slide into that transceiver slot and give you your normal, comfortable connection. Like other transceivers, the first thing you're going to need to figure out is the size of the slot you're putting it into, and that's going to overlap a lot with the speeds that you're trying to work with. The next piece is to figure out the speed of the thing you're plugging into, but also what's at the other end of that cable to make sure that you've got compatible speeds. And the last thing to look at is brand compatibility. For slot size, probably going to be pretty straightforward. When you're looking at least for these RJ-45 type transceivers, yeah, you're almost certainly looking for something that'll be labeled as SFP or SFP+. Again, hey, I'll see if I can put a link around here somewhere where we talked about that already. But SFP usually refers to 1 gig SFP plus to 10 gig, and this is that size. They're the same size as each other. When you get into the speeds other than that 1 and 10 gig, though, 2.5 or 5 gig, those multi-gig or in-base T speeds, that's where things can get a little bit tricky. And hey, again, some links around here somewhere for talking about that recently if you want to check it out. Because basically what it came down to is that 1 and 10 gig, those speeds have been around a lot longer than the 2.5 and 5 gig that came out in the last few years and are suddenly now much more available for that small office and home office kind of space. But that means that there's a whole lot of these transceivers out there that don't support the newer speeds. And so unless the thing you've bought explicitly says that it supports a speed, just assume it doesn't. All right. For instance, and I think I'll see if I can put this up on the screen here, but this one here, this one I just picked up, SFP to RJ-45 transceiver at the top, and then in more detail, SFP plus to RJ-45, and not exactly consistent. Same physical size, but different speeds associated with them. This one calls out right there 10, 5, 2.5, and 1 gig. This earlier model that I had calls out SFP plus 10 gig RJ-45. It doesn't say anything about any other speeds. This one will also do 1 gig, but yeah, this one does not do those 2.5 and 5 gig speeds. And it's the same thing for switches. Let's see, I think it's time for Tiny Brian. There we go, ready to go. There are so many of these 2.5 gig switches out on the market now with names mostly I don't know how to pronounce well. that are so reasonably priced. And it's awesome to have these options now. And a lot of them also have some faster ports, some uplink ports. Usually you think of it, one or two 10 gig ports on there as well that maybe you're using to connect a couple of fast things, but probably classically on a switch, those one or two fast ports would be used to connect to some other faster switch or to act as interconnect between two switches of the same speed, right? Just get you some extra, bigger pipe between the two of them. All right. So there's a lot of options here, but I went ahead and picked out a couple for some examples. So for instance, I've already got one picked out over here. Here's one from a company, I apologize to y'all, Vimin, I'm going to say, probably poorly, with 4 2.5 gig ports and two 10 gig ports, but with just a couple of holes in them, SFP plus cages in there. In this case, we would need to go check the details to make sure of the supported speeds. So for instance, here for the 2.5 gig ports, it calls out that they go the whole way down to 10 megabit per second up to 2.5 gig. And I don't see anywhere in here where it actually says that those 10 gig ports would support either 2.5 or 5 gigabits per second. Honestly, I'd say it's pretty likely, but I wouldn't guarantee it just from looking at the description here, not unless it says so. So this would be where I'd be on the lookout for trying to get a hold of the user manual ahead of time to plan things out. Got to be careful. But here's what I'm using instead. I kind of went a different direction. At least at my house, I'm using one of these Asus home routers, this BE88U. Let me know if y'all be interested in a review on this. This is a home router, but on the back, we've got 4 2.5 gig ports, 4 1 gig, and a couple of 10 gig ports. Now, it does make you either use one of the 1 gig port, or pardon me, one of the 10 gig ports, or one of the 2.5 gig ports as your WAN port, the connection to the internet. And so the way I've got mine set up is one of my 2.5 gig ports is dedicated to my internet connection. I don't actually have faster than gig to the house. It hasn't seemed worth it. But that gives me 3 2.5 gig ports for other devices, 4 1 gig ports, and 2 10 gig ports all on the LAN side. Not necessarily the cheapest way to go, but I decided I wanted an all-in-one unit to cover me for now. And this is going to give me space to connect up a 10 gig connection to my home server and another 10 gig connection over here to the office for maybe another small switch. Be on the lookout for that. We'll see if I'm feeling flush sometime soon. But here is what I've been testing my new RJ-45 transceiver on. What I did is I slotted that over here into this 10 gig SFP plus port and tested it out at various speeds, hooking it up to my laptop with this 5 gigabit USB NIC. So with this I was able to test both 5 gig and 2.5 gig, and for 10 gig connected up to another switch for testing things out. I've got switches, but they're enterprise gear. It's just too loud to run regularly. And for the RJ-45 connection over here, again, just for this, for my purposes for now anyway, 5 gig and 2.5 gig NIC to test out. And with this, I was able to verify that I was able to link up at those speeds and send as much traffic as I could to another device on my network. But here's where we get to the part where we talk about planning, because these things can get hot, and they're not always a good deal. And the heat is part of that. So the heat first. Like I said, I connected to, on my home router over there, both the 10 gig built-in RJ-45 port and using my my new 10 gig transceiver slid into that slot. Both work just fine. But when I was running through this RJ-45 transceiver, it got pretty hot. Not like gonna burn me hot, but like uncomfortable to touch for very long hot. And the exact same cable plugged into the exact same USB NIC, but over on that built-in RJ-45 port, the back of the thing didn't feel terribly hot. Why? Well, what it comes down to, and to make sense of this, we got to talk about inside that switch. So inside some switch port, behind all those RJ-45 ports, or like on a more reasonable thing that won't yell at you, as well, behind all of these, yes, there's that ASIC, application-specific integrated circuit, that is the actual switch chip in there. But between the ASIC and those ports are something called a PHY. PHY is basically saying like the physical interface, and it's a secondary little chip that takes those ones and zeros that are being passed in or out of that port of the switch and converts them to the pulses of alternating current. They're going to go down the wires and go off to whomever else. Or the pulses of electrical current coming in converts it back to the ones and zeros that can then be moved around through the ASIC. And usually, depends on the exact switch and everything, but it's very likely in a lot of cases that one PHY chip might support multiple physical switch ports on there. And there's also very likely a big heat sink on those PHYs. And what it comes down to then is inside that switch, the thing that's doing the actual translating of the ones and zeros to the pulses of electricity going down the wire, it can be more efficient because it's likely, not always, but likely, one chip handling multiple ports. And also, heat management is taken care of because likely there's a big heat sink on there. But if you've just got a hole or an SFP plus cage, well, literally, that transceiver, that RJ-45 transceiver, has a PHY in it. It's got to. It's in there. But instead of being one for multiple ports, nope. Right? One port. Also, instead of a big heat sink and potentially fans blowing across it, it's in a little metal box. So all that heat has got to go somewhere. It is inherently less, or almost certainly less efficient than what would have been built in, and the switch is likely less capable of getting the heat away from it, and that's a big piece of why these get so hot. And it can take up that extra efficiency as well, can take up extra power that you wouldn't otherwise need if you were using the internal PHY. Not every switch PHY is, super efficient or everything, but very generally speaking, these take more power and get hotter than the built-in ones. Now the price. So this is my new one that does 1, 2.5, 5, and 10 gig, and I paid about $40 for it with tax and everything. And it's a reasonable price, glad I got it and all. But let's go take a look at those switches again. So this one we were looking at here, this 6-port 2.5 gig, so 4 2.5 gig ports plus our 2 SFP plus cages to slide some transceiver in, costs a very reasonable $32.50 is what I'm seeing here right now. Let's call it $33. There's a bunch of options here, but one of them is, here we go, the same thing, but with built-in RJ-45 ports. And it's $75. Right, so going from $33 to $75, a little more than twice as much. And so you think, wow, that's almost, it's more than twice as much to have those RJ-45 ports built in. But real quick, if we go get a calculator and we say, what, my $40? All right, so 32 plus 40, I mean, we're already there, right? $72. Oh, look, we're at basically, or at least really close to the price of this other switch by the time we put one of these RJ-45 transceivers into the first one. It's jumping around. There we go. By the time we put 2 of them in here, we're way past the price, right? And so this is what I meant by planning. If you are buying one of these switches and you want those 10 gig ports, but you think that you want to use your normal Ethernet cable to plug into them, buy the one with the built-in RJ-45 ports. It is very likely cheaper. It's very likely, no guarantee, no promises here, but very likely going to run cooler and probably draw less power than whatever transceivers you pick up and put in there. But if Either you already own some switch, my pile of stuff, or you aren't sure if you're going to want to use copper or fiber. That is when these save the day, right? There is absolutely nothing wrong with these RJ-45 transceivers, especially if they support the speeds you're looking for. And for compatibility, for all these cheap ones, they're pretty easy going. Just take whatever transceiver goes in them, no complaints. When you get into the corporate stuff, the expensive, fancy, good stuff, it's a lot more likely to want the transceiver to be the brand of the device, so that's where you got to be a little bit careful. But yeah, if you already own the equipment, you already have the switch that has that SFP Plus cage, but you need an RJ-45, get you an adapter. But if you are about to buy a switch, about to buy a NIC, and you know that you don't need the fiber ports, get the one with the RJ-45 cable. Get the one with the plug you want. Okay, recap time. RJ-45 transceivers are a little box with a PHY in them that let you connect up your cable. This is going to be for somewhere between 1 and 10 gig. Be on the lookout for the speeds advertised on the box or on the transceiver itself to make sure it supports what you're looking for. The newer ones that do those 2.5 and 5 gig speeds too are going to be more expensive than the older ones that only do 1 and 10. But hey, get the one you're looking for. They are going to likely run hotter and maybe draw a little more power than native RJ-45 ports, but if you already own that switch, don't go buying another one just to have the ports you need if some cheap fix like one of these transceivers is going to get you what you're looking for. All right, everybody, you rock. I continue to have a blast, and I hope you're having a good time too. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you in the next one. La 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 la. This is a silly recording. If this were a serious recording, we would have messed up by now.